Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keeping Up with Conspicuous. So, today, as you could probably see, I am joined by the lovely Kevin Ingrey. I usually do this, but I think when it mirrors it, I need to point that way to point to you. But how are you this morning, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me, firstly. Pleasure to be involved. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to me talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about today.
No worries. It feels like ages ago when we first ever organised this. So it's finally come around. But just obviously, so we can know a bit more about your background and what it is you sort of specialise within. What is that, Kevin?
Everything in the Microsoft ecosystem in some way, shape, or form. Ultimately, I've had a career that's taken me through every sort of role, every sort of experience you can think of. I started my career in support of all places, so made the jump from support, consultant, architect, and beyond. Um, but I've pretty much recycled my learning every couple of years to something new because it helps stay relevant, basically.
Yeah.
And given the rate of pace and change in technology, it's one of those things that if you can learn quickly, you normally do pretty well for yourself and learn lots of new, cool, and exciting things. So I've jumped from Microsoft 365, sort of SharePoint way back. Even before that, I used to do a load of open source coding in PHP,
Okay.
through to Dynamics 365, the Power Platform, and now pretty much specializing an awful lot in artificial intelligence. Pretty much anything you can think of where it's new and shiny, I'll go, oh, great, let's go and learn it and figure it out and then try and talk to people about it. Probably could just label myself as like a lifelong geek. Um,
Love
so
that.
lots of
Okay.
experience in just anything that's new, playing around with it and trying to figure it out. So
You don't
yeah, I've,
you don't look old enough to have been through all of those step ups. So you must be keeping your
you're
mind nice
being
and fresh.
far too kind because I liken myself to a car with high mileage at times. Done a lot of miles, but actually quite relatively young. Say that, but I'm edging close to 40 now, so can't be saying that for too much longer. But yeah, no, I've done lots of different things. I think it's probably been the best bit about my career, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
is learning something new, jumping in at the deep end and trying to, see if I can do different things. Um, yeah, it's been a fantastic journey so far.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it is nice when you speak to someone that has sort of worked their way up from the more junior end all the way up to where you've managed to get to. And as you said, just staying relevant with the tech is such a big thing because it's so ever evolving. Um, that it must be quite nice because it obviously mixes up a little bit of what you're learning and what you're doing each time something new comes out. Um, but I know today we wanted to primarily focus on, which I'm really excited to learn about, as I just said before we went live, about that jump from consultant to solution architect. Now, obviously, for people that are in this industry will sort of know which each role entails. But just keen to hear your thoughts and we can sort of discuss from there and see where the conversation takes us.
Sounds great. It's literally one of my favorite topics, and I'm sure people that know me are going to be like, "Yeah, okay, this is clearly the choice of Kevin on this one," because it actually is. Because I've taken some great pride in my career of helping others through the journey and transition because it's not easy and it's not as straightforward, forward as you may expect. So the transition from consultant to architect, to me, is like, for lots of you out there who are listening, who are at that point, it's quite an interesting topic to be listening to today, obviously. But the point I want to try and make through this session is that jump is not just a straight upwards career progression step. I think is the main thing for me. I think it is potentially a bit of a misconception in the industry, and feel free to challenge and query me on that. I'll happily debate everyone. But the idea being that you don't just make a jump from consultant to architect as a next step. It's actually an evolution. It's not just like a natural progression. You have to evolve as a person, as an employee, if you're in your role to be something slightly different, because you go from being let's liken it to like an electrician who knows how to wire systems safely and efficiently, to being someone that's now responsible not just for the wiring. You're responsible for the structural integrity of the house, making sure it stays, from falling over for X amount of time, and it becomes a lot more encompassing in terms of the role.
Yeah.
So it's not just
Yeah.
like a straight progression up. You've hit the top end of consultant. Let's now just make you an architect. Actually, I think a lot of it is you evolving into a new way of being as well. And sometimes that can be really hard, by the way, because
Yeah.
as a consultant, you're the person who's hands-on, delivering, making things work, and you go from almost that responsibility of making it happen to being responsible for allowing everyone to make it happen together as a team. So an architect's role is integrity, sort of breadth over depth as well. So you have to
Okay.
have a lot more skills in not just tech. You have to have skills in all the other areas that you probably have gained during that sort of rise into the consultant or developer world, but put them into just another tier of complexity. So it's
Okay.
like a critical skill shift as well.
Interesting. Because, I mean, it's so refreshing to sort of hear this. And as I said, I'm very interested in this topic because, uh, don't get me wrong, over my time in being a recruiter, I think I've realized it isn't as simple, but I'm excited to dive a bit deeper into why it's not that simple. But, when you first come into the industry and, I see some jobs be advertised as, oh, we are looking for a solution architect, but, it can be a lead consultant that wants to move into that. So those companies that advertise that they can, they are looking for that and they don't mind looking at a lead consultant. What do you what do you think that difference would be as to just looking for a solution architect?
The difference would be someone that's probably when you see organizations looking for those sorts of roles, it means that they're looking for someone to gain and transition from the consultant journey into architect. But they realize and probably appreciate that it's not a just rock up as an architect and day one. It's
Yeah.
evolve into that in programs and show and demonstrate your capability to evolve into that role. So as mentioned in sort of just a little bit earlier, it's that critical sort of skill shift. So they want to see that you can handle the lead consultant role perhaps, and
Yeah.
oversee and deliver first before making that jump, because it's very easy to say I'm a solution architect and walk into somewhere and be the wrong person for that organization.
Yeah.
Whereas having that gradual, you can still be on the tools and still deliver and evolve into that architect is a really good step for most organizations, because you get to see you grow as a person as well and
Right.
get to see the evolution of you and your impact in the organization. So it becomes like a natural reward for delivering well in that time as a lead consultant. So don't feel afraid to take those sorts of roles. In fact, they're probably the stronger ones for you to grow into that architecture role, rather than just going straight in at the architect level, especially if you're on that cusp of consultant, developer to architect. Sometimes you have to make the big leap and fully appreciate that. Sometimes making a leap that has a scheduled cadence and growth to it is just equally as good.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's worth highlighting though, is if you are going into those roles, you need to make sure that help, that development program as such is in place for you. Now, you've mentioned critical skills quite a lot. So if we were to dive more into what those critical skills are, because as you said,
Yeah,
technical
sure.
skills are great, but what specifically are you hinting at for critical skills?
Okay, so the main one I'm hinting at is you go from knowing how to knowing why, is how I like to
Okay.
sort of pitch it. So you know how Dynamics works, you know how the Power Platform works, you may know finance and operations and how certain modules work. You now need to know why it works in such a way and why you're delivering a solution that fits a particular client need or requirement. So
Right.
you have to go from knowing the products to knowing the function and knowing what it is you're delivering. And again, it goes back to that sort of different mindset. of not having to deliver this one particular area. You're responsible for the entirety of that sort of architectural structure and delivery, and that does include various other skills that you need to pick up. The easiest one to say is speaking skills and sort of critical thinking skills in most respects, because you've gone from sort of delivering solutions to now having to engage with people on different levels. It might be that you're having to explain the architecture to someone that is equal, if not potentially senior to you in a client's organization, and have to not just explain it, you have to defend it, you have to articulate it, you have to show why. So thinking beyond the sort of one focus and scope that you've had to actually having the answers to a lot of different questions that may come your way. So being able to handle people is incredibly sort of valuable in an architect's role. It's probably one of the most you end up spending more time talking than doing. So you better get used to talking.
Interesting. Okay. And I mean, off the back of that, I think we all know IT is never always straightforward. I think we'd all love it if it was, but we are going to encounter issues along a transformation or whatever it may be. So that communication is, as you said, extremely key. But I think we've sort of touched upon the fact that where you're dealing with such high up people in the company, if not your equivalent, you're going to face challenges. So as an architect, you're going to be that person to sort of communicate that. So how do you handle those conversations as an architect? What's the difference between being a consultant and an architect from that perspective?
Ownership in lots of cases. So you own the relationship as well as the architecture as well. So the
Right.
architecture of the solution is ultimately your deliverable, and you have to be structured enough to be able to handle those conversations and defend it. And one thing I'd probably add is that you probably need to be able to pivot as well. So sometimes you might have a grand plan for an architecture that technically solves every problem in the world. But actually, clients have different minds and have different requirements of you. So
Yeah.
a good example of that is, and this is something that I often see and have seen throughout my career, people forget, which is like, you might be able to design the best solution in the world, but if the client can't afford it or the licensing doesn't enable it, what's the point? So I
Yeah.
know that's quite a bold statement, but the reality is you need to work within the confines of what the client has available for you to use. And obviously within that, you've got loads of different tools, but ultimately
Yeah.
certain things just will not be able to fly. So you might have the best architecture in the world, but being able to defend it, being able to explain it and make it fit and for purpose is entirely separate conversations. So communication becomes key in that. It's like explaining why you placing certain beams in a house to make sure it's structurally sound. So going back to that sort of house builder analogy again, so apologies for
It's
everyone, you might hear me say that a few times. But you then, because the client's not an architect, potentially you might be explaining to someone who's technical, but you may not, you need to be able to give that sort of level of confidence in your solutions. So
Yeah.
beyond that, active listening is probably a good skill. One that I think most people struggle with, myself
Yeah.
included. So you need to listen to what people are saying to you and don't necessarily need to answer first. So it's a good tip for anyone in the consulting world as well. Sometimes a healthy silence can reveal an awful lot. And being able to listen with intent and understanding before you respond. And it's okay to, by the way, to say, don't have the answer for you right now, but I'm going to go away and explore it.
Yeah.
Actually builds a hell of a lot of rapport and trust if you admit there's areas that you're not immediately having like the perfect answer for. It's one of those weird sort of conceptions that you, again, as an architect, have to know every single answer. No, you have to know all the answers eventually to some of this stuff, but some of it you won't have every answer to. So just say confidently, don't know that, I'm going to go away, going to figure it out and come back to you. It will show a
100%.
level of commitment and willing that will build a lot of trust very early. So it's always something good to throw in, which is just that active listening and almost client empathy to
Yeah.
show that you can develop as well and not just have the answer day one.
Absolutely. I think that's just so key though, because it's kind of like that snowball effect. Like if you were to say, yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing, let's do this, without knowing if it's fully going to work or fit, etc., you're then going to encounter a hurdle. And it's just that snowball effect of, if you don't address the issue from the start or communicate that actually, no, I need to take a step away and have a little think about things before you implement something, you can end up
Yeah,
with disaster.
absolutely. Weirdly, you've just literally jumped into a point that I was going to talk about, which is addressing conflict or challenges early.
Yeah,
One of the worst things that you can do, in my view, is go, everything's okay, and plow on when there is big problems brewing. If you can feel that the, almost spider sense is going and something is making you go, it feels like there might be a problem here, address it. Address it early. That could be just a conversation that gets over a hurdle. It might be a problem with personalities. It might be a problem with addressing some, an elephant in the room. Anything that you can think of. But if you let it fester, it will get worse, especially if it's at a point that is going to be structurally sort of around your architecture and your designs as well. So, you don't want to lay the roof before the foundations are set, because you're then on very, very shaky ground. So it's probably worth just having and learning the skill of being able to have frank discussions. Like, can I have a meeting with you just one-on-one to talk through a few things and get comfortable with difficult situations. I
yeah,
don't think you ever get truly comfortable with them, but over experience and time, you get used to being able to handle them more effectively. So I still remember throughout my career some of the worst discussions I've ever had, and they remain with you even
mm,
to this day. So I know when I say to people in industry, like, what sort of battle scars have you got? Because those battle scars are sort of fundamental to your learning and your knowledge. And
massively.
if, most people don't want to be scarred, and I completely get that, but some of those sort of learning points are good areas that you can take forward. So you've been stung, won't do that again, or, oh, actually that was difficult, I could have done this to make it more, more efficient or improved in the future. I will remember that. So you have these almost like save points, if you think of like gaming
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
career, where you go, right, making a conscious decision to save there and go, got to remember that, I'm not going to do that again next time.
move
Or
on.
that went really, really well, I'll try and replicate that again in the future. So
Yeah,
you have handling difficult conversations and addressing conflict early, really, really key.
absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, like the biggest thing is that client relationship. You want them to come back to you, you want them to trust you. And I think it's just sometimes it's hard, as you said, being able to address it, but you've just got to put that aside. At the end of the day, you want them to continue to come back to you, and you need to just communicate that with them. Um, no one's perfect, and no no implementation is, well, if they're perfect, great, but you're going to face those hurdles, and as you said, you're going to learn from those mistakes, especially in your career. It's going to be a massive thing. And stepping into an architect role, you might encounter a few things where you're like, oh god, like I need to remember to do this next time, and that's
Yeah,
fine, as long as you learn from it and don't do it again.
absolutely. And even if they're perfect, by the way, you can still learn, because you have this
Yeah,
wonderful thing these days of a technology stack that moves on a daily basis. So, I could produce an architecture today. Tomorrow, I could turn around and go, actually, there's something I want to tinker with it and
yeah,
change it, because of the speed of functionality and capability coming into our ecosystem. So, 2 or 3 years ago,
crazy.
you never would have heard like of Copilot or anything like that. Whereas today it's here, it's prevalent and in our face with all the various different other AI tools out there. So you would have different ways of approaching things now. And the best thing you can try and do is try and make an architecture that's as durable for the long term as
Yeah,
as humanly possible, but knowing that stuff will change and adapt. So even with perfect solutions, there's no such thing really, but
yeah,
but you can still learn a good lesson from what went well and what could you try and change next time. I mean, like I say, if I could see some of my old architecture designs and patterns, I would probably tear them apart and go, these are awful today. But that's the hindsight of, living in the future that we live in.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to do just the best that you can in any given context. And hopefully they all go really, really well for you.
Absolutely. I do feel for you guys working in the Microsoft ecosystem though, because I went to a conference on Tuesday, and it's not long been since I've been to a different conference, and now all of a sudden you're getting introduced to like agentic agents and all of this. And I'm sat there and I don't even I'm not hands on. And I just think, how do you guys keep up with all of this? Because as you said, there's always something, a new release wave or something. It's nuts, but hats off to you guys.
Weirdly, I think most people would probably find so from a lot of people that I've engaged with in the industry, it's passion. So if you have a
Yeah.
passion for technology, then you have the passion for learning, then you're going to pick this stuff up. So, the completely unrelated note, but last night a big Google Gemini update came out, and I was, spent most of the evening sitting there hammering away and playing with it because it's really, really cool and interesting. The night before that, it was messing around with the Sora model from OpenAI, and then tonight I'm sure there'll be something, out from somewhere else or something in the Power Platform to pick up and play with. So it's a constant evolution through passion and just that enthusiasm for the roles that we do. You have to be passionate to be able to want to do this stuff and keep on top of the fire hose of change that seems to be coming out. So it's continual growth. Really, it's one of those that growth mindset. Having that sort of natural curiosity to learn is a big factor as well of successful people in the industry, from my view. So really, really, really helpful to have that learning element to your personality.
Absolutely. No, that's really good. And it's, such a big thing within your role anyway. Now, obviously we've touched upon that consultant to architect transition. And if anyone's got any questions about that, please obviously pop them in the comments. But back from the start, from the podcast, you've always said helping people is such a big thing for you as a person, because you've been there, you've done it, you've been through the growth of it all. Now, I get quite a few questions from people, and people are always eager to learn about going into the industry. Now, we've had people come on the podcast and talk about going from that junior and trying to go into the industry. But I know you focus and sort of specialize within helping those with no history in Microsoft or sort of that area and getting into the industry. So what's your advice or knowledge on that area?
Interesting questions. So thank you very much for that one, Lucy. I think
Sorry.
the main thing is some skills are massively transferable. You might be coming from Salesforce, SAP. You may be coming from a non-tech background. So I've seen everyone and beyond sort of make those jumps into the industry. There's a number of people who, success stories of people in the Power Platform who've come from various different roles. One of my former colleague of mine was a bus driver many years ago and joined, got into the Power Platform and moved beyond and is having a very, very successful career now. So kudos to him. But the point is you can make those jumps. You just need to have the passion and take your chances where they come. So if you can demonstrate to me your interest and your knowledge and your learning, I will probably, be hired as a recruiter or as a hiring manager, if we take that role on here, be incredibly interested in your knowledge and your ability to learn, as well as the skills that you have. So the transferable skills are stuff around like personality and the enthusiasm and the stuff that we've spoken around the softer skills. Tech skills can be learned. In all honesty, we've all made the jumps to different tech. How many of us from a Dynamics 365 sort of CE background have delved and jumped straight into the Power Platform? Probably all of us, because there was some foundational knowledge there, and similar tools like Salesforce and others will have some knowledge that is again transferable. It's just a different platform at the end of the day. So if you major in on your skills, try and build a little bit of a portfolio or something to talk about so that you have the foundational knowledge. Use the Microsoft Learn materials. They're really, really good these days. And pick up some of that knowledge and just show your capability. It might just even be down to like talking to someone about the Power Platform and showing your passion could be the difference between making that transition jump or not. So So don't be willing, don't be afraid to show active participatory learning publicly, I think, is the sort of main thing for that. And just be adaptable. So if you're trying to make the jump into the industry, do what you can to learn and make sure you have some good knowledge, but also show the enthusiasm, show the willing and desire to pick it up. So you may have to go, do you know what? I realize I don't know, a senior consultant in Salesforce, but I really like Dynamics. I really want to get into it. I might come in as a consultant and take what in effect may look like a step back. But if that step back then leads you to going, 3 levels higher in the future, because that's the career trajectory that you want, it may make some sense to do that. So don't be afraid to take what could be looking like, a negative step in order to, grow incredibly quick in a new world. So it's something to just adapt your thinking to. But you'll have a load of functional bases. You should be able to pick up and understand like business processes and stuff like that. So if you have any of those skills from other industries, don't be afraid to go really interested in Microsoft. Someone will give you a shot, I'm sure. Because I've seen quite a lot of people make that jump and they've been very successful because they show something that you cannot train, which is passion, enthusiasm, and desire. So if you have that, you probably are going to be a stronger person generally in any organization.
Absolutely. No, I think it does all come back to those soft skills and passion. I think it always ties back to that. If you've got them, you can sort of get into it. Now, I'm just going to flip it on its head a bit and just talk from my perspective of what I've seen in the last couple of years. Obviously, I've only been doing recruitment for two and a half years, which isn't long. But when I first joined, 2.5 years back, we saw a lot more opportunities for people who might want to transfer from a different technology into Dynamics or whatnot. Now, what I've seen in this year, and we know it's been a bit of a tough year for some, though those opportunities aren't coming in as much, when there isn't as much opportunity for those people with that background. And it's hard because I get a lot of people message me saying, oh, can they not train me up on it or whatnot? And for us, we're just not seeing those opportunities. Now, this is me just thinking out loud and I might be talking a load of rubbish, but like at the conference the other day, I noticed, so they've got a new release on the contact center side of CE. And that's one of the first add-ons that is allowing to integrate with other CRM or ERP systems. It's interesting because I don't know whether the start of these different add-ons that Microsoft are doing and allowing it to add on to other systems, I wonder whether that will help an increase in those transferable skills into Microsoft. Don't know your thoughts.
Yep.
I'm just
I'll get
thinking
plenty.
back.
So that leverages into something that's sort of widely known as a hub and spoke model for architectures and platforms. So you have the hub, which is like your central product or solution that you may have, and you have various different spokes around it that feed into it. So if you take like an ERP platform, that would be your sort of hub, and you may have like CRM systems or other systems feeding into it downstream. And Microsoft have almost democratized and opened up a lot of their platform to other vendors. So if you take a look at like Copilot for Sales as a good example, where you can hook into Salesforce. So the Microsoft model is you may be preferring this today. We're not going to stop using Microsoft products with it, because ultimately at some stage you will go, why have we even got Salesforce? Because it's a very easy transition when you've already built like all of the spokes around the hub and go, well, why is that hub? Why is that hub just not in a Microsoft frame now? Let's think about it. Let's lift and shift that. So that model is quite an easy one to engage and sort of consume different architectures and making sure that your architectures are streamlined. So we're seeing that rise, but it also does give you that leverage into the ecosystem, because there's partners out there who are now having to do, how do we connect Power Platform to SAP, for instance, or the other sort of native connectors. So again, let's take Copilot for sales as an example. Well, how do we leverage that to Salesforce? Well, it would be a lot easier if you had Dynamics 365 for sales. It becomes like a very sort of easy question, right? But the point is, those skills are transferable in a Microsoft sense. So Microsoft are engaging other vendors and other people. Lo and behold, we might get people that come into this ecosystem and go, that product's actually really good, really like that. I might want to learn Dynamics now, or beyond. So being able to pick on those sort of areas in that sort of model of architecture is a novel way of coming in. But again, don't be afraid to try and take those leaps and ask for those questions. And if you're speaking to recruiters like yourself, just be honest and say that I've got all these
Yeah,
really wicked skills. I'm great with people and great with clients. Prove it, and someone will take a leap of faith with you, I'm sure. But you
absolutely.
need to show them that there's a reason to take that leap, which is through your knowledge, through your learning, through your enthusiasm for making that transition. So if you can display that, I'm sure people will be very, very interested in having conversations with you.
Absolutely. I do really hope that those opportunities come in a little bit more. I know the market's been a bit restrictive this year, but I just see so many people that want to come into this industry, and I just hope it takes that turn, that those opportunities sort of open the floodgates. Because yeah, it's tough at the moment. Even if you wanted to pitch to a client, oh, I've got this amazing person, they're gonna pick
Yeah,
someone with experience at the moment.
yeah, it can be tough, but don't fret. Keep
Yeah,
plugging away, keep showing what you can do,
learning.
keep learning, keep engaging. And maybe you release some stuff out there into the wild that you've built just to show people. Maybe you do what you did, you've done, Lucy, and go to these events, get your name out there and
Yeah,
build up your contacts and your network.
yeah,
And maybe that will introduce you into somewhere where someone might, have an opportunity for you. So I think it's one of those things that you do have to leap into, and show the commitment and show the effort, and you will be rewarded ultimately, in
absolutely.
some way, shape, or form. Whether it's just skills that you can improve in your current roles, or maybe that's another vector to even explore. You may be doing something in the current role, but go, actually, there's another way of doing things. The amount of people I've seen in IT positions who've gone, I've heard about the Power Platform and learned about it. I came to an app in a day or something along those lines, and look what I've built. And then suddenly it's triggered like an explosion of Power Platform activity in one organization is really, really high. So
Yeah,
you don't even necessarily need to make the jump from a different industry. You could probably change the current place you're at, depending on if you're more likely for end user roles, but you can still stimulate and push that narrative in your own organizations today. So don't be afraid to, even if to challenge your own roles and see if you can improve and change things, even if it's down to personal productivity. You can still show
yeah,
ways of using those technologies.
absolutely. I think it's just so nice. You've got a really positive outlook on everything. I feel, the way that you are always very encouraging with your words from this whole podcast is just lovely. And I think if people are watching, please take this on board. Keep learning. If you've got a passion, just you know, things will change, things will come your way. And I think you touched upon a good thing there as well. Keep networking. You might come across Kevin and you might want to, speak to him about things. You might end up bumping into someone else who wants to mentor you and help you. It is lovely in that sense. So, you know, Kevin, thank you so much. I think we've touched upon some really valid points, which will be really beneficial to everyone watching. I don't know whether you've got any final thoughts or takeaways for the audience at all.
Yeah, I think the sort of final thought for me is just don't be afraid. Even if we're saying some of the stuff which is like a natural progression from consultant to architect, don't be afraid to take the jump.
Yep.
But you just need to prove and make sure that you deliver it well. Listen to some of the people around you, especially other architects that you can learn from and absorb. It used to be obviously a lot easier sort of in the office sort of sense because you'd be around people all the time. So remote is a little bit more challenging, but you can still speak to people and still get advice and guidance. So definitely take those opportunities to learn from others on the path that you want to get to. So if you know someone that is already an architect and doing a great job, go listen to them, go ask them for their advice and see what they say. I'm sure they'll provide with some, good points to help you, take that jump and that leap. And maybe they'll address things with you that you didn't know about yourself.
Yeah.
Always good because everyone has an opinion of themselves. That's normally that you're fantastic, can be true. But also pointing out your inadequacies and getting people to give you constructive criticism and feedback is a way of growth and being able to pick up points and go, okay, I'm not great at that. I will work on it. And it might be people skills, it might be tech skills. So yeah, just take honest feedback from people as well.
Perfect. Well, I think, yeah, that's a really lovely message to leave on. And I just want to thank you again for taking time out of your day to sort of talk to me, and I found it
That's fine. Thank you very
super
much for having me.
interesting. No worries. Now, before we go, we always do the final question. I don't know whether you've seen it before, but it is, if you were not allowed to work in the IT space in the role that you're currently doing, what job would you have?
Oh, good question. I can give you a realistic one. I can give you what I wanted to be as a child.
Okay.
So a realistic one, I always wanted to be a marine biologist.
Wow.
I'd have to go back to school to learn it all. But I always wanted to be a marine biologist. But as a child, if you asked me what would be my ideal job in the future, it'd be Ghostbuster. So
Unbelievable.
let's go with that.
Always follow your dreams, Kevin.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, honestly, thank you so much. If any comments sort of come in afterwards, we will get back to them, etc. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for featuring on the podcast, Kevin. It's been really, really lovely having you on.
No, thank you very much for having me, and hopefully that's helped a few people out there. If not, give myself or Lucy a shout. I'm sure we'll be able to help guide and good advice. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you again for having me.
No worries, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Bye bye.